PMAX and shopping might be the gold standard when it comes to Google Ads for e-commerce right now. But did you know that we here at Cartlift make about $2 million a month for our e-commerce clients with Google search ads only? In this video, I want to share 7 best practices, 7 tips, 7 hacks that we use here at Cartlift every single day when it comes to boosting the performance of our e-commerce clients. So without any further ado, let's jump straight into the tactics that come from actual real-world experience so that you can apply them in your business as well, regardless of the industry that you are in. The first thing is to think in layers of relevance. And what I mean with that is that you shouldn't only think in those ultra specific buying intent keywords like buy a pair of running sneakers online or something very, very specific and bottom of funnel as that. But you really need to think in like nuances and think about what can be useful to your business. For example, we work with a bunch of brands in the supplement, fitness, medical space where this is very, very easy to demonstrate. And one example here might be if you sell, for example, sleep supplements, right? The lowest hanging fruit, of course, is something like buy melatonin sleep supplement, if this is actually what you offer, because that means that the customer already knows what they're looking for and so on and so forth. But the next step might be, for example, supplements for sleep, which is a bit broader because it doesn't mention melatonin specifically, right? Or the next step might be things to do against bad sleep. And then even broader than that might be best sleep or waking up a lot or something like that, where the person doesn't even necessarily look for the solution, but the person indicates a problem with their search query. So you see that things get less and less and less relevant with each sort of circle, so to speak, but all of them are still potentially valuable, right? If you search for back pain, one of our clients sells a sort of solution for back pain, knee pain, all these kind of things, very, very successfully, very large business. And we not only go for the very specific product queries, but we also target people indicating that they have an issue. In this case, for example, back pain. And then we convert them, of course, at a lower conversion rate, but also the CPCs are lower. And that's the whole idea behind that. As long as the numbers make sense, lower CPCs and lower conversion rate, this is a great way to scale your brand to the next level. Then number 2, and this might be a little bit counterintuitive, do not use all 15 headlines in your RSAs all the time. Do not test 3 responsive search ads at the same time all the time, because they really prolong the time it needs to really optimize your campaigns. So it's the best practice out there to use 15 headlines, 4 descriptions, and ideally 2 responsive search ads, and do it all at the same time. But what that means is that Google is effectively rotating 30 headlines, 8 descriptions, and then all the other things at the same time. And this can take very, very long to optimize for. So what we do instead is we try to use certain ad angles where we say, okay, let's only use 7 headlines with our responsive search ads, but create 2 of them and create another one with another 7 headlines, but we test different angles against each other, right? We do not just say 15 headlines with random things and then 15 headlines with another, with more features and benefits with a lot of overlap, which is what most businesses do, because very few businesses have like 2 headlines with 2 responsive search ads with 15 headlines each. And then they are completely sort of creative with their headlines in both cases, right? There is a lot of overlap, of course. So instead of doing that, try to use multiple ads, try to use different angles, and that's a much better test, and you will get to actual results much quicker if you do it like that versus going with the so-called best practice of all the 15 headlines all the time. Number 3, and this is probably a bit more common and many brands might do that already, is pre-qualification on your ad text, especially with price. For example, we work with an 8-figure fashion brand that is selling internationally, especially sort of shoes, right? And the thing is that just based on our ad copy, you might not necessarily know that we are in the luxury space. So of course our copy is sort of geared towards luxury, you know, Italian leather, things like that, you name it. But it might not be clear that we sell our shoes for like $500, $600, $700 or sometimes a little bit more than that. So your messaging needs to pre-filter and pre-qualify. You can do that with price signaling. So you say, hey, starts at 700 or something, so that people that are completely uninterested because they don't have the money or they don't want to spend the money on such an expensive item, they don't click. Don't get me wrong, you will always have people that still click out of curiosity or whatever reason, but you can really reduce your losses from those people that are not your actual customers by effectively scaring them away, price signaling, or just other ways of telling them, hey, you are not my ideal customer, please don't click, please don't make me spend money on you. So sometimes you have to do this in a more nuanced way. I will talk about this a little bit later as well, but sometimes you can literally just say starts at $14.99 or $19.99 or $200 or whatever it might be. Then number 4, use Google Analytics secondary conversions to early identify performance. And that's not only secondary conversions, but also data from analytics in general. So for example, when you have a small brand, you have a small Google Ads account, a limited budget, which we don't have that often anymore because we mostly work with slightly more established brands. But for example, right now we work with a car accessories company that is pretty successful, but they are brand new on Google. So what we do is we use a lot of Google Analytics to find out where are we going in the right direction, right? So we have a bunch of campaigns, shopping and search, no PMAX for the time being, and we constantly check, okay, how do our, or what do our add to carts look like? How much time do people spend on the page? What's the bounce rate? And because we cannot get to like 50 sales a day super quickly, for example, right? We use those early indicators all the time to make sure that our campaigns go in the right direction. Of course, the primary factor is always sales. There's no question about that, right? But we can understand very quickly whether a campaign is doing well, for example, if it gets a lot of add to carts quickly, if it gets checkouts, if people spend a lot of time on the page, because if a search campaign, for example, has like a 98% bounce rate, all other things being equal, that's probably a fairly bad ad, unless it has a ton of sales at the same time. But usually that doesn't happen, right? So if you have a campaign, if you have an ad that generates very bad secondary metrics, bounce rate, time on page, add to carts, etc. This can be an early indicator, especially if you're running on a budget, to kill the campaign early, try something else, modify your keywords, something like that. Or in the case of shopping, try a different product, for example. Very important, especially on small budgets. Number 5, and this ties a little bit into what I said earlier, make your headlines as unique and distinct as possible. Again, many people just repeat their headlines and tweak them a little bit, and that's not a great test. A great test is to completely say something like totally different, and then see what performs the best. Because you can imagine if you use 15 headlines in one ad and 15 in the other, and you are very sort of similar with your approach and your messaging, one ad might get a 3% click-through rate, the other one might get a 2.7 or 2.8, right? And you need a lot of data to make sure that this is actually statistically significant, because if the difference is very small, you need even more data to prove that this is actually a significant result. Whereas if you have totally different ads with different headlines, different descriptions, different messaging, maybe different tone of voice, maybe mentioning features in one, benefits in the other, whatever it might be, you might see a difference of like 3% click-through rate and 6. Or 1.5 and 4, and CPCs of $2.70, right? And that's what we're looking for. We're not testing just for the sake of it to do some random stuff. We actually try to find out, okay, how can we maximize the performance of this search ad for this business, for this brand? And if this requires us to be a bit more creative and test more things and then get like the higher sort of rewards, right? And have a lot more upside. Of course, there is some risk that one of the two ads just tanks because they're so different. But that's not a big deal if you ultimately find one that performs much better than the original, because search is all about, pre-qualification, using great headlines, having good descriptions, but especially headlines. And there's so much you can do there in comparison to shopping, where it's a bit more static, that you really need to leverage that to get the best results, especially because there is so much competition out there. Number 6 is to get some inspirations from the search engine results page regularly. Now, this is something that we don't do all the time, but quite frequently we look at what our competitors are doing. So for example, if we sell random client example, if we sell leather backpacks, right? We regularly check how our competitors are actually advertising their backpacks on Google. So are they using different types of language? Are they using a lot of promotions on there? Are they talking about the features or the benefits of the product? What are they doing exactly? Sometimes it can be a good idea to try to copy them to some degree and of course adapt it to your brand. Sometimes the strategy might be to be completely different, because then you stand out more. So when everyone is doing the same, I like to do something different. So if everyone mentions prices, if everyone just talks about the same few features. If everyone is like very specific with the features, I try to do it a little bit differently and be more focused on benefits to just stand out a little bit more on the page. But of course, you never know, because sometimes it might be that they have tested so many things and they all ended up at this point where they are right now. So this is quite difficult to tell objectively what you have to do, right? It has to be tested, it has to be tweaked, but it's something that you can draw a lot of inspiration from, and therefore I highly recommend it. And now number 7, and there are many, many more of course, but I had to cap it somewhere, is to layer your search ads, ideally using STAGs or single topic ad groups instead of single keyword ad groups, right? And layer them with audiences, for example. So here we work with a 8-figure tea brand, and they're pretty focused on like wellness teas, you know, sort of spiritual aspects of tea. And of course, the tea is also a little more expensive, but it's a very, very successful brand. So instead of only targeting tea keywords, because there are not that many keywords targeting like the spiritual aspect and well-being, etc. At least not according to my first point, which is you have to keep growing with those circles and get broader and broader. So what we do here is we target those very regular keywords as part of our strategy, but we layer them with like audiences of like, you know, well-being, spirituality, you name it, many others. And this is like this two-way targeting setup, so to speak. On the one hand, you target people based on their keywords. On the other hand, you target them based on their identity, based on their behavior, according to Google, of course. And by layering the two, you get an audience that tends to be more, in our case, sophisticated and more interested in this type of tea, okay? So, of course, there is some overlap, even if you don't target this audience. But if you do, now you're, let's say, random number here, you're down from 10 million interested people to 5 million. But those 5 million are way more interested in buying our premium tea, our high-quality, spiritual well-being tea. So that's quite important. If you have if you're in an industry that has some twist to it, like in our case, you can layer audiences to make your ads even more appealing to those people, especially if you want to grow without very specific keywords, right? So if you cannot target purely based on these keywords, because people that search for this type of tea might still use the regular keywords, then this is a great way of finding those people, because of course, as I said, you cannot just scale with keywords alone. So these were 7 very important tips. And again, there are many, many more, but I think that those apply to most e-commerce brands and we use them all the time. If you want to learn more strategies and insights and tips like that, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe for more Google Ads for e-commerce content. And there are 2 links in the description as well. One to our cartlift.co agency page, where we manage Google Ads for e-commerce brands like yours. And the second link goes to the eCom PPC Academy, my Google Ads training to learn how to do it all yourself. So if you want to take your brand to the next level with Google Ads, with sales and ROAS, make sure to check the link that fits your situation best. And with that being said, thanks a lot for watching. I look forward to see you in the next video again, and bye-bye.